as the housing market starts to slow down, sellers become more motivated, properties sit on the market longer. I'm looking at how the conversations have shifted in the recent months. And from what I can see, talking on Messenger, voice texts, phone calls, different conversations with people out there in the field, what I'm seeing is I'm hearing a lot more properties on the market. I'm hearing a lot more vacancies. I know a lot of the Class C apartment buildings are seeing quite a bit of vacancy. There's a lot of free rents with the Class A buildings. There's a lot of delistings of properties. And what seems to be happening is there's a few buyers out there that have interest to buy on seller financing. It's just a matter of the ones that have that down payment that can compete in this market, and that might include 10 or 15% down. There's a few of them out there. And then some of them might even be out of state, but what I'm noticing the most is the conversations and how they unfold over a period of months with the sellers. They become increasingly motivated as they run out of options. There's a process of bridging the gap. There's a process of the initial conversation. If you were to say this is how the conversation is going to be months later, they probably wouldn't believe you, because there is a shifting of beliefs for them to realize that the market has changed that much since, let's say, 2021. So, for example, what does that shifting look like? It may be where somebody finally has decided to sell properties. I've heard where people want to buy a business. They don't have a lot of time, or they're maybe not enjoying their time as a property manager, and they kind of getting tired of it. Those are very common reasons. I know people moving out of state or job transfers or unemployment or other reasons didn't come up this week or month necessarily that often. It's very common that people even have a portfolio of properties, 15, 20, 30, so forth. And they want to get rid of the properties, and they're kind of trying to get a pulse of the market to see what people want to buy. And what I'm seeing is at some point they may want to try to sell in the MLS. They may find that doesn't work. A lot of the properties are rented. Some buyers in the local area want vacant properties, maybe because they can put a rent-owned buyer in there, a contract for deed person there. Maybe they get to do their own screening for the renters. The other thing is a lot of them are rented. Surprisingly, most of them have been rented and for sale. And even I've seen cash flow. They have the cash flow. And why would they sell? Well, they're tired of, owning the properties or being a property manager after so many years. And that's a reason why they would sell. Sometimes the money up front can help as well. A lot of them, it's becoming a lot more popular for them to do contract for deeds now. And they'll very quickly even get down to 5% down very quickly. And as more and more properties crop up like that, and off market, not MLS, we are going to probably even negotiate more at some point here and get closer to 2 to 3% down, maybe even skip a payment or two in agreement with them, and probably change a lot of these to subject to, as we'll be able to have a lot of choices. We'll be able to pick the areas and so forth. The reason is the net sellers are going to exceed the buyers at some point. It could exceed the liquidity at some point. We have to allow the cash on cash return to come in, so that people can build up their reserves again, so that they have the appetite and the demand to buy those cash flowing properties again. So based on the way the market's heading, if in Minnesota, if it's anything like what we're seeing in Florida, there's pent up demand. There's a lot of delistings out there from what I hear. I've heard of enormous discounts, 50, 60% discounts. It has not happened in Minnesota yet. We're starting to see some pretty good terms out there, and I expect those to increase quite a bit based on the way the market's heading and based on the unemployment's going up, and then also the lending is just going to get tighter and tighter. I believe like 06, 07. So if you're a seller and you are waiting to sell a portfolio, or you are waiting to sell on terms, probably don't want to wait unless you want to get less and less down and go from selling on a contract for deed to fewer and fewer options. So just kind of giving you a heads up on what the pulse of the market and what's happening out there, and wish everyone good luck. This reminds me a lot also of the haves and wants market, which is both sides, both buyers and sellers. We see that at MNREIA. We see that at the local community for real estate investors. And it makes for good matchmaking because, you have everybody's got a different solution and a different problem, that needs to be solved. And one person can be a solution for another person. And that happens in the beginning of the meeting at 7:00 on the first Tuesday of the month. And what that might look like is it might be fix and flip properties where somebody would pay cash, and it might even be a wholesaler that found it. There's enough of a spread in there where somebody can make a pretty good profit and make a living from that. And then there's also the buy and hold landlords that like to, buy long term for that cash flow and cash on cash return. With enough of that cash flow and enough properties in their portfolio, if they do like to manage properties, and they pick the right ones from the haves and wants section and so forth, and they're there monthly until they're able to build up that portfolio. The reason they would do that is they like investing, they like the cash flow, but a lot of the times the driver and the inspiration is because they don't necessarily like the job that they're at. Maybe with traffic, or the time they get up, they're working 70, 80 hours, a week, and they're looking at the cash flow in the rental properties as kind of their ticket out of that. So that's where the inspiration is, to go to the haves and wants and start to build a portfolio. Other people like to rehab properties and they get out of their job and do the rehabbing instead, and that's where they buy the fix and flip properties. So the properties are available for those who do show up, and that's MNREIA at the first Tuesday of every month.